Hi everybody, welcome back to With Bowl and Spoon, a podcast about food, community, and how our personal relationships with food grow and evolve over time. I like to call that our personal food evolution. I am your host, Shelly Danko Day. Welcome to With Bowl and Spoon.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
No problem. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and tell people what you do?
Absolutely. So my name is Irwin Mendelssohn. I'm one of the co-founders, along with my brother, of Fulton Commons, which is a shared workspace that, in addition to a traditional co-working space, has you could call it co-working for food, or a shared commercial kitchen for food businesses, in order to be able to launch and scale up their businesses without the large upfront capital investment or long-term commitments that are associated with having their own dedicated space. I'm also involved with some other food-related businesses, including a movie theater, Row House Cinema, which, I mean, it's not primarily a food business, but, you know, we serve really good popcorn. I was born in eastern Pennsylvania in, let's call it Billy Joel Allentown, as opposed to local Allentown, and but grew up in South Florida.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And then I've been here a little over 10 years. The Pittsburgh connection, as I mentioned, I work with Fulton Commons, but more broadly on a variety of businesses with my brother. And he came to college here in Pittsburgh for undergraduate and stayed. And so when we had discussed working together and it was the right time to do that, that led to me moving here a little over 10 years ago.
So what part of South Florida?
Southeast Florida, so Miami when I was really young, and then Palm Beach Gardens near West Palm Beach through late elementary through high school.
So tell me about growing up in South Florida.
So it's very...
And what your experience was with food, if I'm not being specific about
absolutely. So I would say there were sort of two parts to it. So from a food perspective, you know, you have your traditional, to use the current terminology, ultra-processed food diet, but, you know, just regular, you know, quick, easy, whatever type things, and going to Olive Garden's nice, that kind of thing. And then, you know, the other hand, through sports, that led to a little bit of a focus on nutrition and how to eat in a way that was both efficient but also healthy. So that those were kind of the two food-related strands. But, you know, I wouldn't say I wouldn't have considered myself a skilled cook or even an expert, to use the current terminology, foodie. But, you know, at the time, I would not have considered myself as having particularly notable taste. And even now, ironically, even though I've been running a kitchen for over 5 years, I'm still I'm not a really great cook. I can tell you all about how to run a kitchen and kitchen operations, and am privileged to be surrounded by a number of amazing cooks. And I'm sure I've picked some stuff up through osmosis, but you know, my personal culinary skills are not nearly at the level of the people who I'm surrounded by.
Would you consider yourself a foodie, though?
I would say I appreciate food quite a bit, and I think above all, I appreciate when there's someone who has a vision and they execute on it independently of how it comes out. And in fact, you could almost know it's good if there's hits and misses, because they have an idea and they run with it. And that resonates with me as a consumer. You know, so I'm comfortable and in fact excited about going to somewhere in a place I've never been, in a city I've not been to, and just going for it, you know, as a consumer, because it seems like an interesting person doing an interesting thing. And regardless of how it is, that's a more interesting experience to me than the boring stuff I make at home when it's just being really efficient.
So if I can interpret what you said, when you travel, you'll go to like food trucks and stuff that are doing interesting things because you trust that process now?
I trust the process enough to be comfortable with it. And I mean, U.S. food safety standards are, as a rule, you know, good.
But prior to having this, was there hesitation?
No.
Okay.
No. And so, I mean, it's, you know, let's say maybe in certain places, one doesn't necessarily eat the ice in, you know, one's warned not to eat the ice or consume the tap water in certain countries. And
south of the border primarily.
When I violated that rule was when I've had the opportunity to explore the wonders of food poisoning, which is not
terrible.
Fun. Which is not fun. I'm like, but it's such a good hotel. How could a salad be a bad thing? Oh, it was washed. Yeah, okay, whatever. And
you're not from there. You don't know those bacteria. Your gut doesn't know that bacteria.
So, you know, a hard lesson, but a real lesson. And, you know, in general, it's within reason, good to kind of mix it up. So I'll be in Cleveland actually in a few weeks for a conference actually on shared commercial kitchens. And, so I've been looking up like cool places to go in Cleveland that I know nothing about and who the chefs are, or where it is, like what the backstory is. But, that seems more interesting than just going. And I'm not alone in that, obviously, but that seems, that's an appealing thing to me. I think it wasn't really until I started traveling that I was able to develop an appreciation for the variety of food. I feel like a lot of times in the US, the idea of like really nice food is often confined to restaurants that are defined around that, whereas perhaps in, broader travel, you may have really amazing food that's independent of the fact that it's a fancy restaurant or something like that. And that's an interesting way to kind of experience things. And then when you come back and look at it in the U.S., you realize, oh yes, there's a lot of amazing thing that's not, particularly like farm fresh foods and farmers markets. And so I didn't necessarily grow up around farmers markets and all these things. And maybe I don't even know if we had them. Like when I lived in Chicago and New York and different places, and where they had a lot more options and variety, and whether it's fresh food from the farms, which is robust in the Midwest. I mean, in New York, it's not as great maybe as LA, but there's still a lot of markets that are well known and smaller ones where they bring things in and enough range of consumers to be able to support a wide variety of all sorts of food, which is interesting. And then I lived in Connecticut for a bit, near the coast and in an area where it's closely connected to a lot of different farms, and just tasting like really real raspberries that were picked that morning, and it's just like, it's amazing. And that was very different from what I grew up with.
How old were you when you moved to Florida?
4.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So that was your earliest memories were in Florida.
Yeah.
We moved to California when I was 10, and I remember finding pomegranates for the first time. I'd never seen a pomegranate. This was back in the 80s, and that was like mind-boggling to be able to pull one off a tree.
Right, yeah.
And have like free fruit. Like, it was amazing. What were your experiences moving to Florida when you were young? But, I mean, it's a whole different climate. There's stuff growing there all year long. And also you've got the southern influence, the Cuba,
certainly Miami, Cuban food was widely available and amazing, and something that one can take for granted when it's there, but is not as prevalent in the rest of the country, which is sad. And also just, I think the rhetoric, Florida is one of the largest most important agricultural states in the U.S., not just the obvious things like citrus, but also things like tomatoes and potatoes and things. So it's really, even if it's not in the like suburban areas along the southeast, along the coast, where, maybe you think more about golf courses and, the beach and resorts and people on vacation and things like that. As soon as you go inland, I mean, like sugarcane around Lake Okeechobee, like I said, tomatoes are everywhere, and just citrus as you go further north and so on. And I mean, we had fruit trees in our backyard, and as a lot of people did, and it was just sort of normal. And
what kind of fruit trees?
I don't remember exactly what we had. We definitely had a grapefruit tree, and grapefruit, and it sounds silly and dumb, but when I was packing up to go to college, of the few home good belongings that I have, here's some plates, here's some utensils. One of the utensils I had was a grapefruit knife, because who doesn't have a grapefruit knife and a spoon specifically for eating grapefruit sections? Yeah. Which no one has heard of a grapefruit spoon, but it's a real thing. And as well as grapefruit knife. Yeah, and it's amazing. But that's just normal because you eat grapefruit, and that's how you eat grapefruit. And they changed the laws around safety for roadside stands for fresh squeezed orange juice. But you used to, back in the day, be able to, it's like you go to certain, off the turnpike exits would be these places, they weren't really stands, they were more institutions where they'd have massive things set up where you buy this fresh squeezed orange juice. And it was amazing. It doesn't exist anymore because I guess there were rules changed around that.
It always freaked me out when we would go down to Florida and you'd see those big, they're clear because it's really neat. They just pour a box of oranges in the top, and then it goes through this machine.
Oh, the Jumex machine, I believe. Yeah, those are great.
But I always wonder, did they wash those oranges? All of that is going in. That's being washed by the juice going through from the ones above. And
absolutely.
So I'm always, or were they sprayed? Are they organic? What's on those?
Excellent
And
questions.
sure, you're eating bug guts. Of course you're eating bug guts. It's happening. But anyway.
I think the citrus kills whatever's in there. It's like ceviche, It cooks the fish. and hopefully it's the same.
I like that. Okay, good.
Yeah.
That's what I'm going to live by that.
All right.
So you're in Florida. So you go to elementary and high school there?
Yeah, and then for university, I went to Gainesville at the University of Florida.
Okay. And how is that? That's further north.
Yeah, so it's north central Florida.
Yeah.
So it's so it's about an hour, 2 hours north or so of Orlando. And
yeah, so many hours north of Miami.
So it's it's a long state. So
it's a big adjustment.
Yeah.
You had your grapefruit spoon. You were set.
I had my grapefruit spoon, so
ready.
I was pretty much all set. But I mean, it's not like I was really cooking, in my dorm room.
Sure. No.
Or then when I had an apartment, it's not like I was really cooking either. I think I started to develop an appreciation for some aspects of food, being exposed to a broader array of different places, being on your own, and just you get exposed to a lot more. But I would not say my palate at the time had been very refined.
Oh no, I feel like college is a culinary vacuum because you're at the cafeteria. If you go to school, stay on campus.
Yeah,
you have the meal plan. You eat what they. Mostly it's cereal.
And, when I look at some of the university food dining systems now, here in the city of Pittsburgh, for instance, it's wildly sophisticated.
Oh, it is.
And
it's so
that was
great.
definitely not what I experienced at the time at a state university.
Yeah, for sure. Did you say you were an athlete?
I mean, not a serious athlete.
Okay.
I did sports, so wrestling, but I was not, so like food and weight and things like that are a factor. So I think it affected how I viewed nutrition and that's a thing.
And was it like the USDA pyramid, the food pyramid, or was it something other that you had?
More about like just the way in which you can think about how mixing and matching, just the different variables around, like how much you're eating, how good it tastes, and how that interacts with whether it's athletic performance or whether it's overall physically reacting in a positive or negative way, and so I think just being exposed to just how those are different variables was helpful for later on thinking about food and just the notion of so if you're optimizing for sports performance, you can de-emphasize how it tastes or any other factors. There's also the notion of eating for pleasure, and which is independent of, can be independent of the healthiness of it. It certainly can be independent of how that relates to a training regimen if you're on one, or other factors. And so it was just interesting to just think about it in ways that were different from if you, as in the past where I just hadn't thought about it. You just go in with the momentum of what's in front of you. I think over time, as I got exposed just to more variety of different foods, and then just, the difference between fresh food and non-fresh food, and how, two things that are both the same category or the same item, just one that's been, going through the grocery store process for several weeks or 2 months, and one that's fresh just to use a farm example, off the farm, how different that is. Or, a burger from a place that is doing it en masse versus a burger from a place that's an hour away that raises their own cattle, and it's where it's processed is another hour away, then you get it, and grass fed versus I don't know, and those are just two radically different things. 2
weeks versus 2 months old, or however long. Yeah, but
they're both, or like a chicken from the co-op versus a chicken from the freezer at somewhere. They're very different. But they're both the same. It's roast chicken, but they're just radical. It's just such a difference, and that's I think really interesting. And so that's kind of how I've on a personal level, evolved. But again, I'm not. There are many people who have much more deeper knowledge of how to consume as well as how to prepare food than me, by far.
Fair, totally fair. And I guess that's, you don't need to be a foodie or immersed in the food scene to be able to open a shared kitchen space. So why don't you talk about how that came about?
Yeah, absolutely. So so the couple things sort of all kind of came together. So I mentioned that I've moved to Pittsburgh to work with my brother in business. The core focus of our business overall is on renovating old historic buildings for new uses. And we've done that with some apartments in different places. We did that in the building that now houses the original Row House Cinema location in Lawrenceville. And one of the buildings was on the market and we thought was interesting to look at was the building where Fulton Commons is, which is on the north side of Manchester. And the prior owners put it on the market. It is formerly an elementary school from 1947. And so what's now the shared kitchen is in what was the elementary school kitchen. And as we were looking at it, that just got us thinking about, maybe we should do the shared kitchen thing. How did we know about the idea of a shared kitchen? Really that stemmed from, as I mentioned earlier, we have a movie theater with the original Row House Cinema location in Lawrenceville. Our concession providers have included a number of local food businesses. And by working with them, we saw some of the challenges that they faced, whether trying to find space, whether it was working at a church in the middle of the night and running up and down stairs, trying to build out their own space and the pain and struggle that was involved with that. And that perplexed us because we didn't understand the dynamics of the market and what is involved with finding kitchen space. And someone's working in a restaurant in the middle of the night while, the owners, while they're closed and stuff. And
in the off hours, yeah.
In the off hours. And like all these things that people, all these sacrifices, major sacrifices that people are making in order to get their business going. And we're like, that seems really, is it have to be like that? And as we looked at other cities, we learned that many other cities, the same size, larger, smaller than Pittsburgh, have one or more of these at scale. Maybe Pittsburgh could support it too. Now, there have been, even prior to us opening, a number of different shared kitchens that have been in the city. And there have since been others that have opened. But my understanding and belief is that we're the largest, at least in the city limits and potentially in the broader multi-county region. And the question we had is, will this work? Is there a demand for it? So we analyzed all the data and everything like that. And then we're just like, look, all these other cities have it. Cleveland has a bunch. And there's cities, like foodie cities, like where there's a lot of CPG production, like in Colorado and Boulder and Austin and Chicago and a lot of cities. They had a lot of these things. But there were just other cities, like Youngstown had a really good one. And we're like, yeah, let's just go for it. But part of how we did it was we didn't just do the kitchen. The building overall is 19,000 square feet, about half of which is for the kitchen and the other half is for a traditional co-working space. And we're like, let's do a traditional co-working space in the same facility to complement the kitchen, but also to manage the risk of doing something which we weren't really sure how it would do. We knew it would be a challenging thing to operate, and it is. But we also weren't sure if it would work. So that's a big reason we also did a traditional co-working space where we have 32 offices, a lot of open seating, kind of, if you will, fancy coffee shop style. And the idea was not just to provide that. And pre-pandemic, when we were planning all this out, there was a massive amount of momentum for co-working. We opened in, summer of 2020. So when we first opened, there was less demand for co-working. But before, the co-working seemed like the more conservative thing and the kitchen seemed like the bigger risk. And that was part of our plan to, that's why we did it. And that's kind of how we conceptualized going into it to mitigate some of the risks that we felt was inherent in doing it. And then, of course, with the pandemic, it turned out there was, a major need for the kitchen space. The demand shifted because, like, catering, there was less of a need for it because there were just no events. But there was still, like, a lot of, like, meal prep was a big thing. And still a big thing, but like that, the need was even greater as a result of the pandemic. Some food trucks, because there were still things that food trucks could do, and it was actually really important to be able to fill a gap. And just a variety of, folks who were in transition because life changed, and they're like, now's the time to do this thing I've always wanted to do. So we pivoted and really focused on building out the shared kitchen, and that's, which is great. Now the challenge, of course, is we had planned to like gradually ease in the shared kitchen over time and, kind of learn as we were going. So we just had to really quickly learn right away. But we were fortunate to have a number of folks in the kitchen early on who were both very experienced as well as very thoughtful, that played a key role in helping us work through the challenges of how to manage a kitchen which, I mean, you mentioned James and Lena Wise County. They were one of our first members, and, we're super grateful to everything that, James was leading on all the food production, everything that they did to help us figure out how to run a kitchen. And so, it's been over 5.5 years now, or almost 5 years now for the kitchen. So 5.5 for the building overall, but 5 for the kitchen. And so we feel we have a pretty good handle now on how to run it operationally. But, it's still running any business is hard. Running a food business is hard. Running a business of food business, providing space for food businesses has its own challenges. But we feel like we have a much better handle on how to, because it's operations.
Yeah.
It's operations. It's around, it's not just operations. It's a shared space. And so it's, just being able to manage the complexity of that, just having multiple folks in the same space at the same time. And
so how many food businesses do you think you probably know exactly?
Yeah.
How many food businesses do you have, and then how many co-working folks do you have up here? And do they generally, is it a separate membership, or how does that work?
No, great question. So I'll start with all kitchen members have built-in co-working membership. And whereas it's not the other way around, obviously. It's the same base contract, so everyone signs the same general membership agreement. There's just an add-on for the kitchen folks. But they're different, membership categories. So if it were a gym, someone might have the classes membership, someone might have the weights membership, and someone might have membership that covers everything. And so, in the same way, someone could have a kitchen membership that also includes access to co-working space. Someone could have an office membership that doesn't include the kitchen, and someone could have both kitchen and office. And if that makes sense.
If you said the kitchen also includes the office space.
Well, it includes the shared parts of the office. It includes
they don't
all the
have
shared
their
spaces.
own dedicated office
Correct.
space.
Yeah.
I see. Okay, that makes sense.
So
that makes sense.
Yeah. So it's just, and partly that's because the reason we do that is, it's both we have the space, but also to formally acknowledge that an important part of being successful in running a food business isn't just the food production. Or the marketing or getting it out there and selling it. It's the other things that involve, whether it's some is interesting and some, everything's interesting. But, some might be more exciting to some people than others.
The QuickBooks and the emails and the, making your labels and stuff. You have all the equipment here and stuff that you give access to. That's more the general office space that the kitchen people and the office people both have access to.
Exactly. Yeah, and so we feel like that's an important resource for folks who are starting a business from scratch. Basically, we see our role as people are outsourcing to us certain aspects of running their operation so that they can focus on the ones that are most central and unique to them. Specifically, if you're in the kitchen, you've outsourced not just the provision of equipment and the utilities and all of that, but you've also outsourced the ongoing running of that space. And what I mean by the management and running of that space is not only the, let's call it more higher profile things like managing the hood. What do I mean by managing the hood? Keeping certain things clean, keeping certain things changed and updated, managing the companies that take care of each of the different aspects of that. And that's happening, ongoing throughout the year.
Have you ever had to have a grease trap serviced?
We do once a quarter.
Well, as an individual business, if you've ever had to have a grease trap service, you definitely will appreciate the fee that goes into the general maintenance of
and
the
that
kitchen.
and that's where it's challenging is there are a lot of aspects to it, and there's the stuff that's planned. It's easy if it's planned and it's on a schedule. I mean, it can be annoying if it's like a hood cleaning at some late hour, but at least it's structured and planned. Then you have the things that are unstructured planned, like something breaks. Now there's some things where, if you have 4 ovens and one breaks, you have a little bit of flexibility in how long it takes. But if you have one dishwasher, we have one dishwasher, and that breaks, well, we have a 3-bowl sink, but, you kind of need to get that dishwasher fixed, and pretty quick. And if you only have one of something, then that needs to, right away. And things break sometimes when they break.
Yeah.
And we have a schedule for preventative maintenance, but still things break when they break. And so there's a lot with that, but that's just the obvious stuff. Then there's the subtle stuff that, like, again, there's so many variables. It's impressive and fascinating in its complexity, but it's also like, this is what people are paying us for, to deal with, like, the silly things. Like, they're not silly, but like hand towels. Like, again, if you're running your own space, it's buying the towels, it's making sure they're stocked, it's refilling it. It's just, that's just one tiny little random variable, but we have, X number of hand sinks throughout the space. Each hand sink needs to get restocked. We need to restock it, and we need to make sure we buy it on a regular schedule and check it. And that's just one variable. And then it's what glove. We provide gloves, so it's checking the gloves, making sure we provide towels, like for cleaning and so on, making sure that we get enough towels, and that we have enough towels for the week, and that the right towels are available. And what happens if the service doesn't cover something? So like, that's part of what we do, is we're managing it, and then we're creating the policies and procedures so that there's consistent standards, so that people know what the expectations are, independent of every kitchen runs in a unique way, and so we have to have our own standards of this is the expectation around cleaning this, or for this piece of equipment. Like with a flat top grill, for instance, there's many ways in which people have learned to clean flat top grills, and many ways which are super effective. But given the specific tools we have, given the specific chemicals we have, given that it's a shared space, and you might have someone who's vegan use it immediately after someone who's making chicken, how do we create a system to manage that specific to our kitchen? And so, like, part of our job is to come up with a structure and to make sure we have the tools and the chemicals and everything and the training to support that, so that folks can just focus on doing their thing. Because that's already a ton, like running your own business. Because it's not just how good are you as a cook, how efficient are you at purchasing and producing, but how do you build your customer base? And what is the process you're doing to that? If you're delivering, how do you get it out there? And there's a ton. There's so much. It's really, any business is hard. I think food businesses are especially hard, and I think that it's been a privilege, to be able to work with a number of entrepreneurs who are really taking things from, in many cases, just an idea to, things that have, we've seen them grow over the last 4 to 5 years. In some cases, in other cases, folks who have been here, 6 months or a year, and just it's really exciting to see as they've been building their businesses out.
So I imagine that you've learned from your tenants, but they've also learned from you. So there had to be a huge learning curve, because you have to feel somewhat responsible for young businesses and the Allegheny County Health Department rules and all of those regulations. And if you notice something's not going right, you probably say something. But that had to be a huge learning curve for you to learn about all of this food serve safe stuff. And this has to have blown your mind, because you're making buildings, you're renovating buildings, you're saving buildings, and now you're in the weeds with the food stuff. So talk about how that came about.
Yeah, so it definitely
and did you ever want to run away screaming? Just saying, it's probably a thing.
You hear about how people would go into a walk-in and scream. I would describe it as, sometimes I've screamed because of the walk-in, particularly our old walk-in freezer, which RIP. I think it was from the 60s. We just inherited it with the building, and we have a new freezer that we've implemented since. But
for anyone looking to rent a space, the freezer's okay.
We have a great freezer now. It's wonderful. It's lovely. But no, I think so. As I think I mentioned, originally our plan was to really ramp up quickly with the co-working space and be very slow and steady with the kitchen to give us time to become more knowledgeable and skilled in how to operate it. But just with the quirks of the pandemic, just had to make it happen really quickly. And so it was a challenge for sure. And there was a lot, just because my personal background is not in commercial food production, or
in any kind of food production.
Whether from institutional or restaurants. I mean, I worked as I think I was a busboy and a prep cook very briefly, one summer, and I worked in an ice cream shop or something. But it was, A, a long time ago, and B, at a, not at a level where I developed any particular expertise. If anything, I developed.
But there are certain fundamental things that you learn, like washing your hands and pulling your hair back, or whatever, wearing clean clothes, and there's certain fundamental things that you learn when you have even the slightest little bit experience working in food service, which is super valuable.
Absolutely.
And I'm sure that all came flooding back to you.
I mean, it was helpful for sure, but the challenge was to really be able to kind of manage it collectively overall, and then for a piece of equipment that I personally hadn't used, to be able to draw on enough expertise from others, as well as from, just working with it, to be able to not only create processes and procedures to manage it, but also to train others on how to use it and how to do it in the context of a shared kitchen. A lot of it was just doing the thing which I hadn't historically done at home. I do now, but is, just reading the manuals. Starting with that, they're really great. I mean, a lot of it is. I know, but I mean,
the instructions.
It's. I know it sounds very exotic, but it's actually very helpful.
That's fantastic.
I know, right? Why is that a thing? But and then just being, talking to our equipment company, talking to the sales reps. I mean, there are a lot of people who have a lot of knowledge. I mean, obviously watching things online and reading and so on, and then just, with the dishwasher. I mean, the dishwasher is, we have a 3-bowl sink, so it's not like we have to have the dishwasher, but it's a very effective and efficient tool, and it's widely used. And so, me making the transition from, sure, I use dishwasher at home, but it's different in a commercial dishwasher. And, but the bigger challenge was, even when I talked to the experts and talked to people who have worked in different restaurants and so on, running a dishwasher in a shared kitchen is very different from running a dishwasher at a restaurant with a start and a stop, where there's a person or a group of people who have responsibility for doing the dishes. Here, we're a 24/7 facility with multiple companies, each running their own business, and the dishwasher, is not used. It's used a little bit here, a little bit there, a little bit there, a little bit there, and how one how one manages that is different, because it still needs to warm up. It's a high temp sanitizing as opposed to chemical, so it needs to warm up to do it, and then if you're only doing a couple cycles, who cleans what when, and how do you change it all out, and how do you, it's just a little different to operate it. So we had to step back, and I think it was helpful, the fact that a lot of this was new to me, is to be able to step back and say, okay, this is how it applies, this is how it works normally. How do we apply that into the shared kitchen context, being a 24/7 facility with multiple companies, each responsible for their own, the cleanliness of their own objects. And a lot of it was just learning by doing, by just, I'm not going to get inside the electronics or the, the deep mechanicals, but for the stuff we should be able to put together and take apart in order to clean and do the basics, is just going in and just, taking it apart and putting it back together and just figuring it out. So there was a lot of that before we opened, and then just, just kind of going through piece by piece in order to understand it. I spend a lot of times when the service techs come, when they do the maintenance and stuff, I'm always asking, I try to be there, I try to ask questions, and just to learn, all the different pieces and how it all works.
So is it just you?
So that wasn't the original plan, but I've served, I've taken on the role of serving as the kitchen manager, and part of how we made it through the pandemic was to keep our costs as low as possible. Part of how we kept our costs as low as possible is by keeping staffing as low as possible. So so I've been serving as the day-to-day operations manager and sales manager for the space, as well as the owner. But the owner's not that's not like a day-to-day role, right? That's just on paper I'm the owner. But in reality I'm the owner. But that's in terms of actually spending time is running the space, as well as managing the membership, as well as the sales, or bringing new people into the space.
Well, that's a 24/7 job.
It's it's become more efficient.
If you're open 24/7, you are on.
So
24/7. If there's no one else to call,
ideally it's rare, But things can happen when they happen, and that's just how it is. And that's just the nature of it. So as we continue to grow and scale, certainly we look forward to being able to build a team, focusing on operations and sales over time. But
it's been a long 5.5 years.
I've learned a lot. No, I mean, but it's
it does feel like, I mean, thinking back to, just 5 years ago was when pandemic started. It feels like it's been 10 years.
Yeah.
So long.
But 5.5 is kind of...
Not that you're it feels grueling to you. I was just saying.
Yeah, it's just like
5.5 years.
Yeah, I know. It feels like a while ago, but for sure.
It does. That's wild.
But that's just the nature of, that's just the time of when we open, and so how we've, just had to adapt. But we've been hovering around 18 to 20-ish in the kit companies in the kitchen for a while. And, we kind of want to grow it a little bit more. So what's our capacity? Like with everything in the kitchen, there's the science and there's the art. But the science part of it is we built space for 32 different prep stations. So our basic model is that each company has their own dedicated prep station. The idea being that most of what people are doing most of the time is actual prep. The physical use of the cooking equipment. In some cases it can be long, but oftentimes it's really quick and efficient. Even an hour or two is, not as a percentage of the total time in the kitchen that large. And with baking, I mean, it's the hard part is making the batter, making the dough, making the cookies. It's in and out of the oven pretty quickly.
It's all the prepping and the proofing and the
clean, and everything else after that, packaging, cleaning, and everything. So every company has their own dedicated prep station, and then they have their own storage. It's individual storage, whether dry, fridge, or frozen, in shared storage areas. We have shared pieces of cooking equipment where one uses a booking system to schedule when they're going to be on it so that other people know.
What types of equipment would that be? I'm guessing specialty equipment, so...
Yeah, so we have 4 convection ovens, 2 Vulcan, 2 South Bend. We have a combi oven. We have 2 steam kettles, a 12-gallon and 40-gallon. We have a Robocoop. We have 3 sets of 4 burners each. We have a general use char grill. We have a vegan specific char grill, and then we have the flat top, and then we have 2 mixers. That's what's under the hood, and then we have 2 mixers, the 20 and the 40, and then we have we have a dough sheeter, also not under the hood, microwave, and then we have. And that's in terms of the traditional cooking equipment. And then
I just heard about a dough sheeter yesterday, and you're saying these things very fast, and I'm not catching it all.
Oh,
so
sorry.
And it's very lingo heavy.
Yeah, sorry.
But the dough sheeter is like if you're making pies, if you're a bakery and you're making pies, and it will roll out your
it's
pie
like a
crust.
big, massive automated rolling pin,
That's
which is
huge.
great. Yeah, and it's huge, and it's and so when you're doing certain things at scale, it's a massive, it's a wonderful thing
Time
to have.
saver, yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, and each of these pieces of equipment is really interesting, and it's fascinating. Like there was a lot of amazing ingenuity and engineering that went into how they designed these pieces. It's just really clever, and then some of it's really straightforward. Of like, burner's a burner. Yeah, it's really amazing, like what a lot of these pieces can do.
Yeah, it's very, very interesting specialty equipment. Is it gas, electric? Do you have any induction?
No,
stuff?
No induction. So it's we have gas. I mean, some items are electric only, like the mixers and the dough sheeter. I'm trying to think, everything else is connected to. Yeah, everything else is connected to gas. And then, and then these things are just cool. Like the combi oven's amazing because you can do convection, you can do steam, and then you can combine, hence the name, the two, in order to really dial in specialty things. And then it's very programmable, and you can like customize your recipes. And so a particular company can have their own little recipe book or menu items in there, and they can just press it, and then it knows what to do for their cycle. And then it has built-in cleaning functions, which is also kind of nice. And so you can press a button and it just like runs cleaning cycles, which is great. And it's tied into all the chemicals and stuff like that. So
Sweet.
That's pretty slick. And but yeah, and then we also, to support, these are the things that I didn't appreciate in a deep way before really getting involved in this. But one of the one big challenge is how, after everything's cooked, do you cool it? And not just from a food safety perspective, there's certain rules around that where it has to get temperature-wise within certain windows of time, but also from a personal efficiency perspective, which is, sure, you might have X number of hours to get it down from A to B, but you're kind of done cooking and you've already cleaned everything, and do you really want to hang out for another 3 hours while you're cooling? I mean, maybe you do and maybe you don't, and because you have other things to do and it's already been a long day. So we've looked at how do we make this more efficient. So we have a blast chiller, which has been a great tool for getting things, which basically you can go from like right off the burner, right out of the oven to 32 or even 0 fairly quickly. Like you can get a full, within an hour and a half, you can pretty much go like a full, with the blast chiller filled from like 200 down to 32 within an hour and a half. It depends on exactly what it is, and usually it's a lot less depending on the volume and so on. And you can get it down to freezing right away. And this is how it all ties together, right? So that helps make it personally more efficient for the individuals who are using the kitchen, but it's also good because it mitigates the risk for us as a kitchen of, it's not unheard of for things that are like slightly warm or even slightly more than warm to be put into cold storage. There's a degree to which that's actually fine from a food safety perspective. There's a degree, you can't just put it in there hot, like that's not okay. But and you can't put hot things into the freezer and expect it to act like a blast chiller. Mm-hmm. Like that, it actually doesn't work scientifically. But whether you put warm things in a freezer or whether you put things that are a little too warm in the fridge, food safety aside, that ain't good for the equipment.
Mm-hmm.
And
stresses it out.
Yeah, and so it creates moisture. It creates it
affects other foods around it.
There are many knock-on impacts, and part of the challenge of being in a shared space now is that impacts other people as well as us as the facility. But us as the facility, it's not just like, hey, I'm trying to run an efficient business. It's also, if something goes wrong with the equipment, that impacts everyone. Our costs aside, that impacts everyone's functionality and the ability to use the space efficiently. And so that's why having something like the blast chiller is good. That's why we do a ton of training around the importance of good practices and best practices and so on. And so it's like, from our side is, just trying to think about how do we provide the tools and the resources and the training to put people in a position to create efficient and effective processes so that they're not just compliant with food safety principles and being efficient and effective in their use of the kitchen, but are in a position to scale. And you asked earlier about like to what extent some of this helps people learn and things like that. Like, our hope, and I think it's real, is that by having this type of structure and by being exposed to like the different, even some of the vendors that we use, like that, for folks who then go on and open their own space, that puts them in a position to have more experience thinking about it from the perspective of what's involved with running your own facility, compared to if you had been just, may have been a head chef, but you didn't have to deal with a lot of the operational infrastructure stuff necessarily, and or just making decisions around which vendors and things like that. And so hopefully some of the stuff that you're exposed to here and the structure and so on can be helpful for those who go on to open their own spaces.
You said you have 32?
Yeah, so we have 32 stations.
What does that include?
So that includes having your own dedicated dry storage below your prep station for small wares or for some food ingredients.
So it's like, what, a 6 foot?
6 foot wide, 2.5 foot deep. And so that's built in. And then I mentioned earlier, we use scheduling software to book time on the cooking equipment. There's a credit towards booking that's included in the membership rate each month. So $120 worth of booking that's included in the membership, ignoring all the subtlety of it's cheaper at night and stuff like that. The common rate for most of the equipment is $9 an hour in half-hour increments. A little more for like the combi oven, but in general it's $9 an hour. So there's a credit for $120 already built in, and then storage beyond the dry storage that's already included is a la carte, and then cooking beyond the $120 of credit is an additional cost.
So all the initial like entry level is just counter space, like prep space.
Prep space,
okay.
6 feet of dry storage, and then $120 worth of booking on time for cooking equipment, and access to the shared space areas of the co-working space, And then the ability not just to have your own prep space, anyone could spread out to other open prep areas as well. And then as long as the person whose prep station isn't there. So
I would think as long as they don't have it booked, because you'd have to check. Is there a way to check the schedule?
Well, you don't have to book the prep spaces.
You'd have to clean it before.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So you don't book the prep spaces. Because it's yours.
Right, but if, like, say I'm down there and I was like, oh, I'm going to use over Justin's space over there, but then Justin comes in, he's like, I wasn't using it, but I am now.
You have 15 minutes to clear off and clean up.
Okay.
But it's one of those things. No, I mean, that's the rule. But over time, you get to know,
Gotcha.
right? So, like, we're not 100% full, so there's always open spaces. And then over time, you get to know, oh, this is when this person's usually there.
Gotcha.
And then, as we jointly figure out where someone's going to be located, that's part of how we assess it, is like what kind of makes sense for the flow. Oh, this person's usually here at night. You're going to be here in the morning. Okay, you guys should be next to each other. So that's kind of the base of what's included. And then also, like, we provide towels, we provide gloves, which now they've gone back up actually in the last 6 months. But like in the pandemic, it was a lot. And then it dropped back down to a normal price. But we said we were going to do it, so we just stuck with it. And, we provide carts, like camera carts, we provide speed racks, we provide basically things that...
Well, like hairnets?
Hairnets, beard nets, cleaning tools, cleaning supplies. Really, we want to provide the things to ensure that people can be compliant and to create a culture of efficiency and compliance. Everyone brings their own smallwares, they bring their own food. But like I said, at the end of the day, like, it's obviously, if we compare it to, like, not paying anything because you're just in an experimental phase working out of your house, it's a big leap regardless of which kitchen you go to. We feel like the most appropriate comparison is compared to opening your own dedicated facility, which even if, like, you had unlimited funds and you weren't worried about that, it takes a lot of time and it's a long-term commitment and it's a ton of work to do just to get your facility up and running. Funds obviously matter, and so it's here, you're not locked in. So there's, as long as we're notified the month prior to the final month, someone can leave with just letting us know the month before the final month, meaning that if plans change and you're like, this is not what I want to be doing going forward, you're not stuck. Versus if you had a long-term lease or took a big loan to build out a space and you change your plans, that's a lot harder to deal with. And so part of what we provide is the flexibility where we have it ready to go. Part of what we provide is the training and the resources and the, just all the things that we're providing, to support you and your business in terms of, like, just the objects and tools and gloves and things like that. And then finally, it's the fact, as I mentioned earlier, that you've outsourced the management of the space to us, so that you're not spending your time poring over the trash and recycling bill, and then getting on the phone with them and figuring out, hey, what's up with that, or why didn't they pick up cardboard?
Do you want to mention some businesses that have sort of graduated from your space?
I mentioned earlier, one of the first businesses that started here was Wise County Biscuits, and they now have a restaurant, Wise County Cafe. They're still at they have been in the past at a number of farmers markets. I'm not sure if they still are, but...
Unfortunately, no.
Yeah, sorry.
Sad.
And so, when they came here, they were doing a number of farmers markets, and they had worked at a different commissary, and coming here gave them more flexibility because of being 24/7, to take on more catering orders, to build out their frozen products business. And they knew when they came here that their goal was to open their own space, and they had been looking for a space, and they found the space and they were building it out. And as they got closer to the launch of their own, to the opening, they did a lot of work here for recipe development and staff training. And and so that was nice to see, kind of them take advantage of the facility to really build out the breadth of their business, and then in preparation for the launch of the restaurant.
I'm so glad they didn't open an oyster bar.
But they're extra. James is an extraordinarily talented chef, and so it's whenever they have specials over there, like they just had their pork sandwich in preparation for Northside Sandwich Week, and
I didn't know about that.
So whenever they have a new menu item, it's always really exciting because it just highlights the range of what James and the team can do. Another company that worked here, they already had a space lined up, but it was taking longer than they had originally planned, and so they were here for about a year while they were building out their space. Was Anthos Bakery in Castle Shannon.
Okay.
And so Devin, who does the bread, he's a baker. He's a baker by background. His bread's amazing. I'm not even a huge bread guy, but his bread's, like, amazing. It was exciting to see them kind of build out their business, and they did a number of markets and events and stuff throughout the time while they were here. Like another example would be Soul Refill, what's the food connection? So, Sydney, who runs that, it's a refillery that does a mobile refillery, and she's also set up at different farmers markets. So she does home products like soaps and things like that, and bath, as well as food. So, a lot of stuff like could be dry pasta, it could be grains and things like that. And so from a food perspective, it was important from a code perspective to have, a licensed commissary out of which you would be storing everything and packaging it and then cleaning the different things. And so she was here doing the food portion of that as she was scaling up her business. And then once it got to a certain point where she wanted to put all components of the business in the same facility in order in part to be able to hire people, in order to buy things in larger quantities, she moved to her own dedicated space within the X Factor. A number of food businesses have larger, that's where Millie's started before they opened their space and things like that. Yeah, so those are a couple examples of folks that have kind of scaled up. And then we've had other folks who've been here, for over 4 years, and which is wonderful. And, we've seen them be able to scale up within. So I mentioned each company has their own station. We've had some companies have more than one station. And then we have some companies that just the nature, maybe they have a food truck and most of what they're doing is on the truck. And so when they come and prep, they don't actually they have enough space to store a lot of things on their truck too, so they don't necessarily need the full 6 feet of dry storage, and they're here at hours where it's not that busy, so they can kind of just float and use whatever tabletop's available. It trims the cost down a little bit, and then it also, from our side, it frees up a space. So it's we have 32 stations, but some companies have more than one, some don't have one. And so, full for us, it's sort of an interesting operational thing. It's more important to have a broad range of people doing different businesses, so they're not all using the same piece of equipment at the same time.
Good point.
Or if you have people who aren't using any equipment, it's easier. So could I take 5 charcuterie companies? We don't have any charcuterie companies right now, but if we had 5 charcuterie companies, no problem, because they're not really using the equipment, and so it's really a storage challenge. And then, but if I had 5 people who all wanted to do heavy duty baking, that all wanted to join at once, and they all wanted to be here Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, that's a little more complex, because how do we manage the capacity? Now, if someone's I want to be here 6 to 9 in the mornings, and someone's I only want to be here on Saturday, and someone's I want to be overnight, and someone's I'm going to be during the day. Okay, that's a little easier. But, so that's part of the challenge. It's, from an intake perspective is, trying to figure out how to manage it being a shared space. It'd be easier if everyone had their own equivalent of a dedicated office with their own hood line, because then they're, they can come and go and do what they want when they want, and it doesn't matter. But being a physically open shared space, it creates a need to curate from the perspective of ensuring minimizing the risk of operational bottlenecks on behalf of everybody. So
yeah, that sounds like a nightmare.
I mean, it's a challenge. So that's part of it. And then just we've realized early on that we can handle a lot, but we can't provide, we're not set up to accommodate everything. And so it's just knowing what our strengths are and what our limits are. And one of them is, even if though theoretically someone could use all the equipment all the time, theoretically that creates a bottleneck given that we're a shared space. So we had to understand that. Once we understood that, it's intuitive, but once we really understood it, and now we proactively manage it on behalf of everybody.
What is next for Fulton Commons?
So really for us is continuing to no major grand new ideas. It's really about how do we execute in the most efficient way possible in terms of continuing to provide a space and continuing to improve in how we are providing the space that we provide for our kitchen members, continue to improve and recruit new folks into the co-working space. And we try to do events that bring a lot of people together, a lot of events around food in the co-working space. Someone might have a new recipe or a new product launch and tasting events and things like that. So we try to do
your members,
for the co-working members,
get together and have networking events.
Yeah,
Neat.
Yeah. And so is thinking about how can we do more of that in order to make it more interesting and beneficial for everybody across the board is an interesting thing. We want to continue to grow and bring on a broader staff. Just continue to serve as a resource, for food entrepreneurs with the kitchen here in Pittsburgh. And then also, with the co-working spaces more broadly, you serve as a resource, whether it's entrepreneurs, whether it's individuals working remotely, whether it's teams who are looking, for offsite space for their events and things like that, or for their board meetings or whatever. It's just being able to, provide that space in a way for folks. It's really about how do we make this as effective as possible and continue to grow and then provide more value for the folks that are here.
Is there any equipment that you have on your wish list?
It's a great question. I mean, we do have room under the hood where we can handle one, maybe two, potentially new items, but I mean,
I can't even imagine what these things might be, so if you can elaborate a little bit more.
Yeah, so it's more about something new per se of like, is it worth it to get another 2 ovens, or do we get another set of burners, or is it fine right now? I call it the Thanksgiving turkey oven problem at home. But like, let's say you are hosting Thanksgiving every year, and you do have a very large turkey. So once a year, you need to have an oven that is large enough to handle that very large turkey. But that's only once a year. Not everyone's hosting it every year, and a lot of people might never host Thanksgiving. But it's not uncommon for people at home to buy an oven that's designed to accommodate that rare instance. So, I mean, here it's sort of, if as thinking about new equipment, it's, let's say there's instances where all of X is being used. If that's super infrequent, that's okay. If it's becoming a bottleneck, then it's a question of how do we manage it? One way to manage it could be to add some new equipment to manage the overflow. But that's, not a situation that we've necessarily found ourselves in at this point. I would think potentially because we've been trying to be proactive to make sure there's enough distribution in terms of what people are using. And also people, proactively, I think in some cases do it themselves in the sense of like, hey, I know I'm going to be using a bunch of ovens. Maybe I'll just come in a little earlier or come in a little late one time to try to avoid being here when others are. So it kind of plays out in different ways based on people's preferences and so on.
Why don't you tell us how people can reach you? And find out more about Fulton Commons? Yeah,
absolutely. So our website, which is fultonpgh.com, and then our phone number is on there.
Get your radio voice out.
Oh, yeah, exactly. So, welcome to the Fulton Commons Network. So 412-368-2707, and then via email as well. And there's a form on there to request a tour. We're always happy to chat with anyone to share more about what we do as a space, about whether it's the right fit or not, about even if it's just like someone's, even if someone's at an early phase, it's not something that they're planning to do in the immediate future, but they're just, thinking about it. We're happy to have a conversation just to chat about what it could look like, whether it's here or in a different space, working in a shared kitchen. We're always happy to try to be helpful. We're not really set up so much for advising on the on the more, with the members that are here informally. We do try to be supportive, not in a structured consulting way. We're not set up for that, but we try to be supportive and helpful in terms of brainstorming about or chatting about ways to think about growth and scale up. In terms of initial inquiries, we're always happy to chat about what it would mean to transition potentially into a kitchen when one hits that point of growth in their business. So.
Cool. Well, Irwin, thank you so much for your time today.
Sure. Thank you for the opportunity. So.
Everyone knows that food is cool. No secret. Eat that food with a bowl and spoon. Everyone knows that food is cool. No secret. Eat that food with a bowl and spoon. Lick that spoon. Oh.
With Bowl and Spoon is written, produced and hosted by Shelley Danko Day. Original theme song was written and performed by Paul LeBreeze and friends. You can listen to With Bowl and Spoon wherever you get your podcasts. Don't forget to subscribe, like, review and share. Follow us and send us questions or messages on Facebook and Instagram at With Bowl and Spoon. Thanks for listening.
And bowl